"Can I have a piece of your lunch?" Single father shared his sandwich with a girl, not knowing she was the daughter of a billionaire woman. "Before we start, I love seeing this community grow. Feel free to introduce yourself below." Robert Chen clutched his worn leather briefcase as autumn wind whipped through downtown Seattle, leaves swirling around his scuffed dress shoes. His stomach growled loudly. He'd skipped breakfast again to afford Sarah's new school backpack. The single father of 8-year-old Emma hurried toward the small park where he ate lunch every Tuesday, hoping the half sandwich tucked in his brown paper bag would quiet the gnawing hunger that had become his constant companion. At 34, Robert had learned to stretch every dollar until it screamed. 3 years since his wife Linda left him for her wealthy boss, abandoning both him and Emma for a life of luxury in California, he'd been raising his daughter alone on his modest accounting salary at Henderson & Associates. Designer clothes had given way to thrift store finds, fancy restaurants to home-cooked meals scraped together from whatever was on sale, but Emma's bright smile and infectious laughter made every sacrifice feel worthwhile. He settled onto his usual bench beneath the old oak tree, unwrapping the peanut butter and jelly sandwich he'd made with the last slice of bread from their nearly empty kitchen. As he took his first careful bite, savoring the simple flavors, he noticed her, a small girl with tangled blonde hair and dirty, expensive-looking clothes sitting on the grass nearby, watching him with the hollow, desperate eyes of someone who understood true hunger. She couldn't be older than Emma, maybe 8 or 9 years old. Her once beautiful dress was torn and stained, contrasting sharply with her obviously expensive patent leather shoes and delicate gold bracelet. Fresh tear stains marked her pale, dirt-smudged cheeks, and she hugged her knees tightly against her chest as if trying to make herself invisible to the world. "Excuse me, mister," the girl whispered, approaching his bench with hesitant, careful steps. "Could you maybe give me just a tiny piece of your lunch? I promise I'm not being greedy or anything." Robert's heart clenched painfully in his chest. The politeness in her request, the way she apologized for being hungry, told him everything he needed to know about this child's desperate situation. Without hesitation, he tore his precious sandwich directly in half, the larger portion going to her small, trembling hands. "Of course, sweetheart," Robert said gently, his voice warm with the same tone he used when Emma was scared. "What's your name, honey?" "Sarah," she replied, accepting the food with a gratitude so profound it nearly brought tears to his eyes. "I haven't eaten anything since yesterday morning, maybe the morning before that. I lose track of time sometimes." Yesterday morning? Robert's parental instincts, honed by 3 years of single fatherhood, screamed emergency alarms. This wasn't just a hungry child. This was a little girl in serious trouble, possibly danger. "Where are your parents, Sarah?" he asked carefully, trying to keep the worry out of his voice. The girl's green eyes, so bright and intelligent despite her obvious distress, filled with fresh tears that she tried desperately to wipe away with the back of her hand. "My mommy. She's always working in her big office downtown. She has very important meetings with very important people. She doesn't even know I'm gone, and I don't think she'd care if she did know." Robert studied Sarah's face more carefully, the expensive dental work visible when she spoke, the quality of her torn designer dress, the obvious signs of neglect mixed with indicators of extreme wealth. Something about this situation wasn't adding up in his mind, but right now, a hungry, frightened child needed immediate help and comfort. "Tell you what, Sarah," Robert said, pulling out his thermos of coffee. "You can share this too. It's got extra milk and sugar just the way my daughter Emma likes it. It might help warm you up a bit." As Sarah ate with the desperate hunger of someone who truly hadn't eaten in days, Robert's mind raced through possibilities. Should he call the police immediately? Child Protective Services? But something about her desperate gratitude, her obvious fear of being discovered, made him pause and reconsider his options. "Why are you being so nice to me?" Sarah asked between careful bites, as if the sandwich was the most precious thing she'd ever received. "Most grown-ups just walk past me like I'm invisible." "Because everyone deserves kindness, especially brave little girls who are courageous enough to ask for help when they need it," Robert replied simply, remembering his own childhood bouncing between foster homes. And because I have a daughter just about your age, and I'd hope someone would help her if she was scared and alone." Sarah's eyes widened as if basic human kindness was completely foreign to her privileged world. She finished eating slowly, savoring every bite, then stood to leave with obvious reluctance. But Robert gently caught her arm with the lightest touch. "Sarah, wait just a second. Will you be here tomorrow? Same time?" She nodded silently, hope flickering in her tired eyes for the first time, before disappearing into the crowd of downtown pedestrians, leaving Robert sitting alone with 1,000 urgent questions and the strangest, strongest feeling that this chance encounter would change absolutely everything about his ordinary life. 23 blocks away in the heart of Seattle's financial district, Victoria Sterling paced frantically across her corner office on the 42nd floor of Sterling Tower, her designer heels clicking an anxious rhythm against the imported Italian marble floors. As founder and CEO of Sterling Industries, the Pacific Northwest's largest and most influential real estate development empire worth over $2.8 billion, she commanded absolute respect from corporate boardrooms to city council chambers. But right now, staring out at the city skyline she had helped shape, she felt completely powerless and terrified. "Any word at all from the security team?" Victoria asked her longtime assistant Margaret, for what felt like the 100th time in the past hour, her usually controlled voice cracking with barely contained panic. "Nothing concrete yet, Miss Sterling. They're systematically checking all the usual places, the shopping centers, movie theaters, even the homeless shelters downtown. The private investigators have street teams canvassing Pioneer Square and the waterfront areas." Victoria's perfectly manicured hands trembled as she gazed out at the sprawling metropolis below. 8-year-old Sarah had been missing for over 36 hours now, the longest she had ever disappeared during one of these increasingly frequent episodes. These terrifying vanishing acts had started shortly after the bitter, highly publicized divorce from Richard 3 years ago, but they were definitely getting worse, more frequent, and lasting longer each time. "She's just a little girl," Victoria whispered, pressing her palm against the cold window glass. "She can't have gone far. She doesn't even know how to use public transportation or navigate the city streets alone." The cruel irony of the situation wasn't lost on her sharp business mind. Victoria Sterling could purchase anything money could buy, control virtually any situation through sheer force of wealth and influence, manipulate city planning decisions that affected millions of people, except she couldn't control her own daughter's overwhelming pain and desperate need for attention. Since the messy, vindictive divorce from Richard, a divorce that had played out across tabloid headlines for months, Sarah had become increasingly withdrawn, acting out in ways that absolutely terrified Victoria. The tantrums, the silent treatments, the deliberate defiance, and now these disappearances that left Victoria's heart shattered with worry. "The private investigator Morrison is holding on line 3, Margaret announced softly, recognizing the urgency in her boss's demeanor. Victoria grabbed the phone with desperate hope. "Please tell me you found her, James. Please tell me she's safe." "Not yet, Victoria, but we do have some promising leads to follow. Street cameras captured footage showing her near Pioneer Square around noon yesterday. She appeared to be alone, possibly hungry, definitely looking lost and confused." Hungry. The single word hit Victoria like a physical blow to her chest. While she had been trapped in back-to-back merger meetings, negotiating a $75 million acquisition deal, her own precious daughter had been wandering the dangerous streets of downtown Seattle, scared, alone, and apparently going without food. "I want you to double the search team immediately," Victoria ordered, her voice regaining some of its usual commanding authority. "Triple it if necessary. I don't care what it costs. Hire every private investigator in the city if you have to." After hanging up, Victoria sank into her massive leather executive chair, completely overwhelmed by guilt and self-recrimination. Her own childhood had been spent desperately longing for her parents' attention and affection, while they relentlessly built their own business empire, traveling constantly and leaving her with a succession of nannies and housekeepers. She had sworn with every fiber of her being that she would be different, that she would be the mother she had always wished for. Margaret knocked gently on the office door, The Peterson merger documents are ready and need your signature for tomorrow's board meeting. Not now, Victoria snapped reflexively, then immediately softened her voice with genuine regret. I'm sorry, Margaret. Please cancel everything on my schedule for the rest of the week. I need to focus entirely on finding Sarah before something terrible happens to her. She pulled out her personal phone, scrolling through dozens of photos of Sarah, birthday parties where Sarah sat alone while Victoria worked late, school events Victoria had missed for important client meetings, family dinners where Sarah sat silent and sad while Victoria checked emails on her phone. Victoria closed her eyes, forcing herself to remember Sarah's heartbreaking words from their last argument just days before she disappeared. You love your stupid buildings and your dumb meetings more than you love me, Mommy. I wish Daddy had taken me with him to California. The painful, unavoidable truth was that Victoria simply didn't know how to be the kind of mother Sarah desperately needed. She knew how to negotiate complex deals, how to win impossible battles, how to build a financial empire from nothing. But she had never learned the simple, essential art of just being emotionally present for her daughter. Her phone rang sharply, interrupting her tortured thoughts. Security again. We found something important, Ms. Sterling. A witness reported seeing a man sharing his lunch with a young girl matching Sarah's description in Occidental Park. We're investigating this person thoroughly right now. Robert arrived at Occidental Park 15 minutes early the next day, carrying 2 carefully packed brown bags and silently hoping against hope that Sarah would return safely. Yesterday's unexpected encounter had haunted his thoughts all night, keeping him awake with worry and questions about the mysterious little girl who had stumbled into his ordinary life. Emma had immediately noticed his distraction during their simple dinner of mac and cheese and canned green beans. Daddy, you seem really sad tonight, she had said with the sharp intuition that 8-year-olds possess. Did something bad happen at work today? Just thinking about someone who might need our help, sweetheart, Robert had replied, not wanting to worry her with adult problems. Can we help them? You always tell me that helping people is the most important thing we can do. Now scanning the park benches and hoping to spot Sarah's small figure, Robert wondered if he had made the right decision yesterday. Maybe he should have immediately called the authorities, contacted Child Protective Services, or at least tried harder to get more information about her family situation. But something about Sarah's genuine fear, her desperate hunger, and her obvious terror of being discovered reminded him powerfully of his own childhood, bouncing between foster homes after his parents died in a car accident when he was 7, always hungry, always afraid, always wondering if anyone actually cared about him. You came back, a small wondering voice said behind him, filled with amazement. Robert turned around to find Sarah approaching cautiously, looking even more disheveled than she had yesterday. Her expensive dress was torn in new places, and streaks of dirt marked her pale face, but her eyes held a spark of hope that hadn't been there before. Of course I came back, Robert said gently, his heart breaking at her surprise. I promised I would be here, and I always keep my promises. I brought lunch for both of us today. Sarah's green eyes widened in complete disbelief. Both of us? You mean you brought food just for me too? Ham and cheese sandwiches, apple slices, chocolate chip cookies, and chocolate milk, Robert announced proudly, patting the bench beside him in invitation. My daughter Emma helped me pack everything this morning. She's very good at making sure people have enough to eat. As they shared their meal together, Robert studied Sarah more carefully, looking for clues about her background and situation. Despite her current disheveled condition, absolutely everything about her spoke of privilege and wealth. Her perfect posture, her articulate speech patterns, the way she carefully folded her napkin, her obvious familiarity with expensive things. This definitely wasn't a homeless child or a runaway from a poor family. This was clearly someone's beloved, well-educated daughter who had somehow ended up lost and alone on the streets. Sarah, can you tell me your last name? Robert asked as gently as possible, not wanting to frighten her. She hesitated for several long seconds, clearly debating whether to trust him. Sterling, she finally whispered. The name hit Robert like a lightning bolt of recognition. Sterling Industries, the massive corporation that owned at least half of downtown Seattle's most impressive buildings. Victoria Sterling, the famous billionaire CEO whose photograph graced business magazines and newspaper financial sections. Could this frightened, neglected little girl possibly be related to one of the most powerful women in the entire Pacific Northwest? Your mother, Robert said very carefully, trying to keep his voice calm. What's her name? Victoria, Sarah whispered, confirming his growing suspicion. But she's always busy with really important meetings and big business deals. She doesn't have any time left for me anymore, especially since Daddy moved to California. Robert's mind reeled with the implications. He was sitting here sharing his simple lunch with the daughter of Victoria Sterling, one of the wealthiest, most influential people in the region. But looking at Sarah's hollow, sad eyes and her obvious emotional neglect, he saw only a lonely child who desperately needed someone to care about her well-being. Why don't you go home, Sarah? I'm sure your mother must be worried sick about you right now. Sarah's laugh was bitter and cynical, far too mature and knowing for her 8 years. She probably hasn't even noticed that I'm gone yet. She might not notice for days. She loves her precious buildings and her important clients way more than she could ever love me. Victoria's phone buzzed insistently at exactly 3:17 a.m., jolting her from the restless, nightmare-filled sleep that had become her reality. Private investigator James Morrison's name flashed urgently on the screen, and she answered before the first ring had completely ended. Please tell me you found her, Victoria demanded immediately, her voice hoarse from crying and shouting orders to search teams. We located her general whereabouts. Morrison's voice was cautious and professional. But Ms. Sterling, I need to warn you that this situation is quite unusual and not what you might be expecting. I don't care how unusual it is, just tell me where my daughter is right now, Victoria demanded, already reaching for her clothes with trembling hands. She's been spending significant time in Occidental Park with a man named Robert Chen. He's 34 years old, divorced, single father to an 8-year-old daughter named Emma. He works as an accountant at Henderson & Associates. We've run a complete background check. No criminal record, no history of violence, exemplary credit rating despite modest income. Victoria's blood ran ice cold with terror. A complete stranger. What is he doing with my daughter? Why does he have access to Sarah? According to multiple witnesses we've interviewed, he's been sharing his daily lunch with her for the past 2 days. All reports describe his behavior as gentle, protective, almost fatherly in nature. But Ms. Sterling, I'm calling the police immediately, Victoria interrupted, panic rising like bile in her throat. This sounds like kidnapping or worse. Ma'am, please wait and listen to me carefully. I really don't think this situation is what you're imagining. This man, Robert Chen, seems genuinely concerned about Sarah's welfare and safety. Multiple witnesses described him as kind and caring, treating her with obvious affection. Victoria paced frantically around her massive penthouse bedroom, designer gowns hanging in the walk-in closet like silent witnesses to her complete breakdown as a mother. I don't care how kind he seems to observers. He's a stranger who has somehow gained access to my vulnerable child. Ms. Sterling, with all due respect, Sarah appears to be actively seeking him out. She's choosing to go to that park every day. According to our sources, she specifically told him that her mother is always too busy with work to notice her or spend any time with her. The words hit Victoria harder than any hostile corporate takeover or vicious business attack she had ever endured. She sank onto her king-sized bed, the phone trembling violently in her manicured hand. What exactly are you saying to me? I'm saying that your daughter is desperately crying out for attention and genuine affection, and she found exactly what she needed in a complete stranger. This Robert Chen, he's been feeding her, listening to her problems, giving her the focused time and emotional support she apparently isn't receiving at home. Victoria's reflection stared back accusingly from her bedroom mirror. A successful, powerful woman in a silk nightgown worth more than most people's monthly salaries, surrounded by luxury and wealth beyond imagination, yet completely and utterly alone in her failure as a mother. When was the last time she had really talked to Sarah? Not about school schedules or piano lessons or homework assignments, but actually listened carefully to her daughter's thoughts, dreams, fears, and feelings. I want complete surveillance on both of them immediately, Victoria commanded, her business instincts taking over. Full detail 24-hour coverage. I need to know absolutely everything about this Robert Chen and his relationship with my daughter. Already in place and operational. Mr. Sterling, if I may respectfully suggest something, maybe this is actually an opportunity for you to understand what Sarah really needs from you as her mother. After hanging up, Victoria stood at her floor-to-ceiling windows, staring out at the glittering city lights of the empire she had built through sheer determination and ruthless ambition. Somewhere out there in those streets, her precious daughter was seeking emotional comfort from a complete stranger, because her own mother had failed her so completely. Emma, what would you do if you met a little girl who seemed really, really sad all the time? Robert asked his daughter over their breakfast of oatmeal and orange juice the following morning. Emma looked up from stirring honey into her bowl, her dark eyes serious and thoughtful. I would try really hard to be her friend, Daddy. Sad kids need friends more than anything else in the whole world. That's absolutely right, sweetheart. Sometimes the kindest thing we can do is simply share what we have with someone who needs it. As Robert walked to his office through the crisp Seattle morning, Emma's wise words echoed repeatedly in his mind. For 4 days now, he had been meeting Sarah in the park during his lunch hour, and each encounter revealed more heartbreaking details about her emotional pain and neglect. Yesterday, she had told him about her parents' bitter divorce, how she secretly blamed herself for all their fighting and arguing. Maybe if I had been prettier, Sarah had whispered, her 8-year-old voice filled with devastating self-doubt, or smarter in school, or better at playing piano, maybe Daddy wouldn't have left us and moved so far away. Robert's heart had completely shattered for this little girl who carried such enormous, inappropriate guilt on her small shoulders. His own divorce from Linda had been painful and messy, but he had made absolutely certain that Emma understood it wasn't her fault in any way. At lunchtime, Robert found Sarah waiting anxiously by their usual bench, but something seemed different about her today. She appeared more nervous than usual, constantly looking over her shoulder and scanning the park as if expecting someone to appear. "Are you okay today, sweetheart?" Robert asked with concern, settling beside her with their carefully packed lunch. "I think someone might be watching us," Sarah said quietly, her voice filled with worry. "I noticed the same black car parked across the street yesterday, and again today. It makes me feel scared." Robert's protective instincts immediately flared to high alert. He had been wondering when Victoria Sterling might discover her daughter's daily whereabouts and routine. A woman with her resources and connections wouldn't take long to track down a missing child. "Sarah, maybe it's finally time we called your mother. She must be absolutely terrified with worry about you." "No, please." Sarah's reaction was immediate and fierce, her small hands grabbing his arm. "Please don't make me go back there yet. She'll just send me to my room while she works on her laptop and makes important phone calls. At least here, someone actually talks to me and listens to what I have to say." The desperate longing in her voice made Robert's decision for him. "Okay, but Sarah, I need you to promise me something very important. If you ever feel unsafe anywhere, or if you need help with anything at all, you call me immediately." He carefully wrote his phone number on a clean napkin. "Can you memorize this number?" Sarah nodded seriously, studying the digits with intense concentration until she had them committed to memory. As they shared their sandwiches and apple slices, Robert couldn't help but notice a black luxury sedan parked strategically across the street, the same vehicle Sarah had mentioned yesterday. Professional surveillance, discreet but obvious to someone who knew what to look for. "Sarah," Robert said carefully, choosing his words with great thought, "what if your mother just doesn't know how to show you that she cares? Sometimes grown-ups get scared too, you know." "Scared of what?" Sarah asked, genuinely puzzled. "Scared of not being good enough parents. Scared of making mistakes that hurt their children. Scared of losing the people they love most in the world." Sarah considered this possibility, her intelligent 8-year-old mind working through complex adult emotions that should have been far beyond her years. "Do you really think she loves me? Even though she's never around anymore? I think any mother in the world would be incredibly lucky to have a daughter as special as you," Robert said with complete honesty. "Sometimes people just need help learning how to show their love in better ways." Unknown to them both, Victoria Sterling sat in that black sedan just 50 yards away, watching through high-powered binoculars as a complete stranger provided her daughter with the emotional support and genuine attention she had been too busy and self-absorbed to give. Victoria's hand shook uncontrollably as she watched Robert gently wipe chocolate milk from Sarah's chin with a paper napkin, exactly the same tender gesture she used to make when Sarah was smaller and needed her mother's care. The simple act of kindness unleashed a devastating flood of precious memories. Bedtime stories read in funny voices, scraped knee kisses that magically made pain disappear, the sweet, trusting weight of Sarah sleeping peacefully in her arms during afternoon naps. When had she stopped being that kind of mother? When had work become more important than her daughter's emotional needs? "Ma'am, should we intervene now?" Her security chief, Marcus, spoke quietly from the driver's seat, his hand resting on the door handle. "Not yet," Victoria whispered, unable to look away from the heartwarming scene unfolding before her. Sarah was animated and joyful, gesturing excitedly as she told Robert something that made him throw back his head and laugh with genuine delight. Victoria couldn't remember the last time she had made her daughter smile with such pure happiness and contentment. Through her earpiece, Victoria listened to their conversation, courtesy of the sophisticated long-range microphone Marcus had carefully positioned nearby. "My daddy used to read me stories about princesses before he moved away," Sarah was saying thoughtfully. "But those princesses were always just sitting around waiting for someone else to come save them from their problems. I think princesses should be brave enough to save themselves, don't you?" "Absolutely," Robert replied with complete seriousness, treating her opinion with the respect she craved. "The very best princesses are the ones who are brave and kind and use their power to help other people who need it. That's exactly what I want to be when I grow up. A princess who saves people instead of waiting around to be rescued." Victoria's eyes filled with hot tears that threatened to ruin her carefully applied makeup. How had she missed this? Her daughter's dreams, her thoughtful opinions about fairy tales and courage and helping others. She had been so intensely focused on building a financial empire for Sarah to eventually inherit that she had completely forgotten to actually know and understand the remarkable child she was building it for. "Sir, we have movement," Marcus announced urgently. Victoria looked up to see Robert standing and checking his watch. The lunch hour was ending, as it did every day. As always, Sarah clung desperately to these final precious moments, clearly reluctant to return to her lonely, isolated world. "Same time tomorrow?" Sarah asked with hopeful anticipation. "I'll be right here," Robert promised without hesitation, then paused thoughtfully. "Sarah, I want you to know something important. You're not alone in this world, okay? Even when it feels like nobody cares, there are people who think you're absolutely wonderful. People like you, people like me," Robert confirmed, his voice thick with genuine emotion and affection. Victoria watched her daughter walk away with her shoulders straight and her head held high, radiating new confidence and self-worth. For 4 days, this complete stranger had given Sarah something she desperately needed, the unshakable feeling that she truly mattered to someone. As Robert packed up their lunch trash and prepared to return to work, Victoria made an impulsive decision that would change everything. She climbed out of the luxury sedan, her expensive Louboutin heels clicking against the pavement as she approached him with her heart pounding. "Mr. Chen," she called softly, her voice barely steady. Robert spun around immediately, his face cycling rapidly through surprise, recognition, and finally protective wariness as he realized who was speaking to him. Ms. Sterling. They stood just 3 feet apart, the billionaire CEO in her perfectly tailored $1,000 suit and the modest single father in his department store clothes. Two parents whose lives had become unexpectedly and permanently intertwined through love for the same precious little girl. "We need to talk," Victoria said, surprised by how vulnerable her voice sounded. Robert nodded slowly, his protective instincts clearly engaged. "Yes, we absolutely do." Neither of them realized that this conversation would change not just their own lives forever, but the entire trajectory of their families' futures. Sarah, watching breathlessly from behind a large oak tree, held her breath as the two most important adults in her world finally came face to face for the very first time. The real story was just beginning to unfold. "Before you say anything," Robert began, his voice steady but protective, "I want you to know that Sarah is safe. She's been safe every moment she's been with me. I would never hurt a child." Victoria's carefully constructed composure crumbled instantly. Tears she'd been holding back for days streamed down her face, smearing her expensive makeup. "I know," she whispered, her voice breaking. "I've been watching you both. I've seen how gentle you are with her, how you listen to her, how you make her laugh." The admission hung between them like a bridge neither expected to cross. Robert's defensive posture softened slightly as he witnessed the raw pain of a mother in crisis. "She thinks you don't love her," Robert said quietly. "She believes your work is more important than she is." The words hit Victoria like physical blows. "That's not true. Everything I do is for her. The company, the money, all of it. It's her inheritance, her future security." "But what about her present?" Robert asked gently. "What about her childhood? Her need to feel valued and heard?" Victoria sank onto the park bench where her daughter had found comfort with a stranger. "I don't know how to be the mother she needs. My parents were always working, always traveling. I swore I'd be different, but look at me. I'm exactly like them." Robert studied this powerful woman who controlled billions but couldn't control her daughter's pain. "Sarah told me about the divorce. She blames herself for your marriage falling apart." "What?" Victoria's head snapped up. "That's impossible. Richard and I fought about his gambling, his affairs, his complete irresponsibility with money. Sarah had nothing to do with our problems." "Did you tell her that? Did you explain that sometimes adults make mistakes that have nothing to do with their children?" Victoria's silence was answer enough. In her rush to protect Sarah from the ugly details of the divorce, she'd left her daughter to fill in the blanks with her own devastating conclusions. "I can fix this," Victoria said, her business instincts kicking in. "I'll hire the best child psychologists, family therapists. Money can solve this problem." "Can it?" Robert challenged softly. "Sarah doesn't need expensive therapy right now. She needs her mother to show up, really show up, not with checkbook solutions, but with time and attention and genuine interest in who she is." Victoria looked at this modest man, who'd given her daughter something priceless, the feeling of being seen and valued. "Why did you help her?" "You didn't know who she was." "Because she was hungry and scared, and I have a daughter too. Because sometimes the most important thing we can do is share what little we have with someone who needs it more." The simplicity of his answer made Victoria realize how complicated she'd made everything. While she'd been building empires, this man had been building something far more valuable: human connections. "Will you help me?" Victoria asked, swallowing her pride completely. "Will you help me learn how to be the mother Sarah deserves?" Robert considered her request carefully. "That depends. Are you willing to put Sarah first? Really first? Not just say it, but actually do it." Victoria nodded, knowing that this conversation was changing the entire trajectory of her relationship with her daughter, forever. 3 days later, Victoria Sterling did something unprecedented in her business career. She cleared her entire calendar for 2 weeks. No meetings, no calls, no emails marked urgent. Margaret had nearly fainted when Victoria announced her decision. "But the Morrison deal closes tomorrow," Margaret had protested. "Tom Morrison can wait," Victoria replied, shocking her assistant into silence. "My daughter can't." Now Victoria sat nervously in Occidental Park at 11:45 a.m., 15 minutes before Sarah's usual lunchtime with Robert. She'd traded her power suit for jeans and a simple sweater, feeling more vulnerable than she had in years. Robert arrived precisely on time, carrying his usual brown bags. His face showed surprise at seeing Victoria, but also something that looked like approval. "She doesn't know I'm here," Victoria said quickly. "I wanted to observe first, to understand what she needs from our interactions." "Smart approach," Robert nodded, settling on a nearby bench. "Just remember, Sarah's incredibly perceptive. If you're not genuine, she'll know immediately." At exactly noon, Sarah appeared, her face lighting up when she saw Robert, but her expression changed to confusion, then wariness, when she spotted her mother. "Mommy?" Sarah's voice was small, uncertain. "What are you doing here?" Victoria's heart clenched at the fear in her daughter's voice. Fear that she was in trouble, that this safe space would be taken away. "I came to apologize," Victoria said simply. Sarah approached cautiously, like a wild animal unsure if it was walking into a trap. "Apologize for what?" "For being too busy to see how much you were hurting. For making you feel like you weren't important to me. For failing you as a mother." The honesty in Victoria's voice seemed to surprise Sarah. She glanced between her mother and Robert, clearly struggling with conflicting emotions. "Robert told me about your conversations," Victoria continued, "about how you blame yourself for Daddy leaving. Sarah, sweetheart, that was never your fault. Not for one single second. But you and Daddy fought about me all the time," Sarah said, her young voice heavy with guilt. "No, baby, we didn't. We fought about grown-up problems, about Daddy's gambling and the money he lost, about promises he broke. You were the only good thing in our marriage. You were never the problem." Sarah's eyes filled with tears she'd been holding back for 3 years. "Really? Really?" Victoria confirmed, opening her arms. For the first time in months, Sarah ran to her mother, allowing herself to be held. Robert watched this reunion with quiet satisfaction, knowing he'd played a small part in healing a broken family. But as Victoria held her daughter, he also felt a strange pang of loss. Their lunch meetings had become the highlight of his days, too. "Mr. Robert," Sarah said, pulling away from her mother but staying close. "Will you still have lunch with me sometimes? I don't want to stop being your friend." Robert looked at Victoria, who nodded gratefully. "I'd be honored to continue being your friend, Sarah, and maybe your mom would like to join us sometimes." Victoria smiled through her tears. "I'd like that very much. I think I have a lot to learn about being a better friend to both of you." 2 weeks later, an extraordinary sight appeared in Seattle's business district. Victoria Sterling walking hand in hand with her daughter toward the park, both of them carrying lunch bags and laughing at something Sarah had said. The transformation hadn't been easy. Victoria's first attempts at normal mothering had been disasters. Overscheduled fun activities that felt more like business presentations than bonding time. But slowly, with Robert's patient guidance and Sarah's cautious trust, they'd begun building something real. "Tell Robert about your art project," Victoria encouraged as they approached their usual meeting spot. Sarah's face lit up. "I'm painting a picture of all the people who make me feel safe. There's you and Emma and Robert, and Mrs. Patterson from school who always listens when kids have problems." Robert smiled as he unpacked their expanded lunch. Emma had insisted on contributing homemade cookies for everyone. "I'd love to see it when you're finished. Maybe you could come to our house for dinner sometime," Sarah suggested boldly. "Mommy's learning to cook real food instead of just ordering from restaurants." Victoria laughed, no longer embarrassed by her domestic shortcomings. "I made pancakes yesterday that were only slightly burned. We're making progress." As they ate together, Victoria marveled at how natural this felt. For years, she'd believed that love meant providing material security. Now she understood that sometimes love was as simple as sitting on a park bench, sharing sandwiches, and really listening when someone spoke. "Sarah, tell Robert about the changes we're making at home," Victoria prompted gently. "Mommy moved her office to the house so she can work while I do homework. And we have dinner together every night now with no phones allowed at the table. And Saturday mornings are just for us. No work at all." Robert raised his eyebrows, impressed. "Those sound like big changes, Victoria." "The company survived," Victoria said with mock surprise. "Apparently the world doesn't end when I'm not available 24/7. Who knew?" But beneath the humor, Robert could see the genuine transformation in Victoria. The sharp edges had softened. Her smiles reached her eyes now. She touched Sarah frequently, small gestures of affection that spoke of a mother learning to show love in ways her daughter could understand. "There's something else," Victoria said, her voice becoming more serious. "Sarah and I have been talking, and we have a proposition for you, Robert." Sarah bounced excitedly. "Tell him, Mommy. Sterling Industries has an opening in our financial department. Senior level, significant salary increase, full benefits. The position would involve some travel, but nothing like my schedule used to be. Robert blinked in surprise. Victoria, that's incredibly generous, but I couldn't accept charity. It's not charity, Victoria said firmly. It's recognition. You're brilliant with numbers, you're honest, and you have something my company desperately needs. You understand what really matters. Besides, she added with a smile, Sarah and Emma are already planning to be best friends. This just makes the logistics easier. Sarah grabbed Robert's hand. Please say yes. Emma could come to my school, and we could all be like a real family. The word family hung in the air, loaded with possibilities none of them had expected when this journey began with a shared sandwich. 6 months later, the Sterling Industries annual charity gala was unlike any the company had ever hosted. Instead of the usual stuffy affair with rubber chicken and speeches nobody remembered, Victoria had transformed it into a genuine celebration of community service. Ladies and gentlemen, Victoria addressed the crowd from the podium, Sarah standing proudly beside her. This year we're doing something different. Instead of talking about helping people, we're going to actually help them. The audience murmured with interest as Victoria gestured to tables set up around the ballroom. Each station represents a local charity that Sterling Industries will be supporting this year. But more than that, our employees will be volunteering their time, not just their money. Robert watched from his table, still amazed by how much his life had changed. The job at Sterling Industries had been everything Victoria promised. Challenging work with people who respected his abilities, financial security he'd never imagined, and the flexibility to be present for Emma's childhood. But the professional benefits paled in comparison to the personal transformation he'd witnessed in both Victoria and Sarah. The brittle, desperate woman from the park had evolved into someone who laughed easily, who put her daughter's needs first, who'd learned to find joy in simple moments. "Daddy, look!" Emma whispered excitedly, pointing to the stage. "Sarah's going to talk too." Indeed, Sarah had stepped forward to the microphone, looking confident and poised despite being only 8 years old. "Hi, everyone," Sarah began, her clear voice carrying across the ballroom. 6 months ago, I was really sad and angry. I thought nobody loved me, especially my mom. I ran away and ended up hungry and scared in a park downtown. The audience listened with rapt attention as Sarah told her story. The loneliness, the fear, and the kindness of a stranger who shared his lunch. "Mr. Robert didn't know I was rich," Sarah continued. "He didn't know my mom owned a big company. He just saw a hungry kid and decided to help. That taught me something important. The best people are the ones who are kind when nobody's watching, who help others even when they can't get anything back." Victoria's eyes filled with tears as she watched her daughter speak with wisdom far beyond her years. So tonight, while you're deciding how to help people, remember that sometimes the most important help is just paying attention, just caring about someone who feels invisible, because everybody deserves to feel like they matter. The ballroom erupted in applause, but Robert noticed something else. The way Victoria looked at Sarah with pure pride and love. The way Sarah instinctively reached for her mother's hand. The way both of them had healed from wounds that had seemed impossibly deep just months ago. After the speeches, Victoria found Robert at the dessert table. "Thank you," she said simply. "For what?" "For saving my daughter, for saving me, for showing us both what really matters." Robert smiled, thinking of that first day in the park when he'd shared half a sandwich with a hungry child. Sometimes the smallest acts of kindness create the biggest changes. "Speaking of changes," Victoria said with a mysterious smile, "Sarah has something she wants to ask you and Emma." The question came on a sunny Saturday morning 3 weeks later, as the four of them walked through Pike Place Market together, a routine that had become precious to all of them. "Robert," Sarah said with the seriousness only 8-year-olds could muster, "do you think you and Emma would like to be our real family?" Robert stopped walking, his heart skipping as he understood what Sarah was asking. Emma, who'd been chattering excitedly about the flower vendors, suddenly went quiet. Victoria stepped forward, her cheeks flushed with nervousness. "What Sarah's trying to say is, Robert, these past months have been the happiest of my life. Watching you with Sarah, seeing how you've helped heal our family, getting to know the incredible man you are, "Mommy's trying to ask if you want to marry us," Sarah interrupted with 8-year-old impatience. Emma's eyes went wide. "Really? We could all live together. Sarah could really be my sister." Robert looked at Victoria, this powerful woman who commanded boardrooms but was trembling as she waited for his answer. Then he looked at Sarah, the frightened child who'd become confident and joyful. Finally, he looked at Emma, his daughter who'd embraced Sarah like the sister she'd always wanted. "Victoria," Robert said softly, "6 months ago you were a stranger, but watching you transform, seeing you put Sarah first, learning to know your heart, I've fallen in love with the woman you've become." Victoria's tears flowed freely as Robert continued. "Sarah, Emma, you girls have already chosen each other as sisters. The question is, are you sure you want a dad who's still learning how to make pancakes without burning them?" "Yes!" both girls shouted simultaneously, drawing amused looks from other market-goers. Victoria stepped into Robert's arms, and for a moment, the busy market faded away. "I love you," she whispered. "I love your kindness, your wisdom, your ability to see what really matters. I love the father you are to Emma and the father you've become to Sarah." "I love you too," Robert replied. "I love your strength, your determination to change, your fierce love for Sarah. I love watching you discover the joy of being present." "This is the best day ever," Emma declared, hugging Sarah tightly. "Does this mean we get to plan a wedding?" Sarah asked excitedly. Victoria laughed through her tears. "It means we get to plan a life together, all 4 of us." As they stood there in the heart of Seattle, surrounded by the bustling energy of the market, Robert thought about the journey that had brought them to this moment. It had started with hunger, Sarah's physical hunger, her emotional hunger for attention and love, Victoria's hunger to be a better mother, his own hunger for a family that felt complete. Now, looking at the faces of the 3 people who had become his world, Robert understood that sometimes the most extraordinary love stories begin with the simplest acts of kindness. 1 year later, the wedding of Victoria Sterling and Robert Chen was featured on the society pages of every major newspaper in the Pacific Northwest, but not for the reason such weddings usually made headlines. Instead of an elaborate ceremony at the city's most exclusive venue, they'd chosen to marry in Occidental Park, at the very bench where their story began. Instead of hundreds of business associates and social connections, they'd invited only family, close friends, and representatives from the 5 charities that had become the focus of the Sterling Foundation's work. "Dearly beloved," the officiant began, "we gather today not just to witness the union of Victoria and Robert, but to celebrate the power of love to transform lives and heal broken hearts." Sarah and Emma stood as joint maids of honor, wearing matching dresses they'd picked out together, their bond as sisters now unshakable. Margaret served as Victoria's best friend and witness, still amazed by her boss's transformation from workaholic to devoted mother and partner. "Victoria," the officiant continued, "do you take Robert to be your husband, knowing that he first won your heart by showing kindness to your daughter when she needed it most?" "I do," Victoria said, her voice strong and clear. "I take him as my partner in building not just a marriage, but a family founded on love, presence, and the understanding that our greatest wealth is the time we spend with each other." "Robert, do you take Victoria to be your wife, knowing that your love helped heal a family and brought 4 hearts together as one?" "I do," Robert replied, looking at Victoria with eyes full of love and admiration. "I take her as my partner in showing our daughters that love means showing up, paying attention, and choosing each other every single day." As they exchanged rings, Sarah stepped forward with the wedding gift she'd been working on for months, a painting showing their family's story. The first panel depicted a lonely little girl in a park. The second showed a man sharing his sandwich. The final panel showed all 4 of them together, laughing and whole. "This is our family story," Sarah announced to the small gathering. "It started when someone was kind when they didn't have to be. It grew because people chose to change and love better. And it proves that sometimes the most important things happen when we're not even trying to be important." After the ceremony, as the small reception continued around them, Victoria pulled Robert aside to the exact spot where they'd first spoken. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you'd just walked past her that first day?" Victoria asked. Robert considered the question, looking at Sarah teaching Emma how to make flower crowns while their wedding photographer captured the moment. "No," he said finally. "I think we were meant to find each other. Maybe not in that exact way, but somehow. Sarah needed someone to see her. You needed someone to help you remember what matters most. Emma needed a sister, and I needed all of you to make my family complete." Victoria leaned against her husband, watching their daughters laugh together in the golden afternoon light. "The Sterling Industries board still can't believe I actually take weekends off now." "Scandalous," Robert teased, kissing the top of her head. "You know what's really scandalous?" Victoria said with a smile. "I'm happier now, working less and being present more than I ever was when work was my whole life." Sarah was right that first day in the park. The best people are the ones who are kind when nobody's watching. As the sun began to set over Seattle, the Chen Sterling family gathered their things and headed home together. Sarah skipped between her parents, holding both their hands, while Emma chattered excitedly about their upcoming family vacation, their first real vacation where all phones would stay home and they'd focus entirely on each other. "Daddy," Emma said as they reached the car, "when I grow up, I want to be like you." "Like me how?" Robert asked, curious. "I want to be the kind of person who shares their lunch with someone who's hungry, even if it's my last sandwich." Robert's heart swelled with pride as he realized the most important lesson had been learned. That kindness creates ripples that can transform entire families, that love grows when it's shared, and that sometimes the most extraordinary adventures begin with the simplest question: "Would you give me a piece of your lunch?" Their story had started with a hungry child and a generous heart. It had grown into something beautiful, a testament to the power of showing up, paying attention, and choosing love over everything else. And it was just the beginning. Millionaire woman catches single father security guard studying in the dark. What happens next shocks everyone. Before we get into it, if this video found you at the right moment, let me know with your favorite emoji. The fluorescent lights of Riverside Corporate Tower flickered off one by one as the clock struck 11 p.m. on this cold December evening in Chicago. Marcus Thompson adjusted his navy blue security uniform and began his final rounds, his footsteps echoing through the marble lobby adorned with Christmas decorations that seemed to mock his financial struggles. At 32, he'd been working double shifts at Sterling Enterprises for 3 years now, ever since his ex-wife Sarah left him with their 6-year-old daughter Emma and a mountain of legal fees that seemed to grow larger each month. The building was a testament to success and prosperity. 40 floors of gleaming offices where deals worth millions were made daily. Marcus knew every corner, every emergency exit, every security camera. But tonight, like every night for the past month, he wasn't alone on his shift. "Daddy, I finished my math homework," Emma whispered from behind the security desk, her small fingers clutching a worn pencil that was more eraser than lead. The little girl had been coming to work with him every night since their babysitter, Mrs. Chen, quit last month to take care of her own grandchildren. Marcus couldn't afford another babysitter, not with rent due in 2 weeks and Emma needing new shoes before school started again after winter break. "That's my smart girl," Marcus smiled, his voice warm despite his exhaustion. He knelt beside her makeshift study area, which consisted of cardboard boxes he'd salvaged from the building's recycling room. Under the dim emergency lighting that was all he dared use after hours, Emma's homework was spread across these improvised desks. Her reading book, The Cat in the Hat, was held together with clear tape, and her purple backpack had more patches than original fabric. Marcus had tried everything to create a better study environment for his daughter. He'd positioned 2 office chairs he'd found in storage to give her proper seating, and he'd even brought a small pillow from home so she could nap comfortably when her eyelids grew heavy around midnight. The security office had become their second home, a place where father and daughter bonded over spelling words and math problems, while the rest of the city slept. "Daddy, this word is hard," Emma said, pointing to elephant in her reading workbook. "ELELEP, elephant. Perfect pronunciation, Em. You're getting so good at sounding out the big words," Marcus praised, his heart swelling with pride. Despite their circumstances, Emma was thriving academically. Her teacher, Mrs. Rodriguez, had mentioned during parent conferences that Emma was reading above grade level and showed exceptional problem-solving skills in mathematics. What Marcus didn't notice was the shadow moving on the 32nd floor high above them. Victoria Sterling, CEO and founder of Sterling Enterprises, had returned to retrieve important documents for tomorrow's crucial board meeting with potential investors from Japan. The 58-year-old billionaire rarely worked this late, but the merger deal that could expand her renewable energy empire across Asia required her personal attention and signature on several time-sensitive contracts. Victoria had built her fortune from nothing, starting with a small solar panel installation business in her garage 30 years ago. Now, Sterling Enterprises was valued at over $2 billion, with offices in 12 countries. She was known in business circles as brilliant but ruthless, someone who could spot talent and opportunity from miles away, but had little patience for excuses or weakness. As she headed toward the executive elevator, her Louboutin heels clicking against the Italian marble floors, Victoria heard soft voices drifting from the lobby 32 floors below. The building's acoustics were excellent, designed that way for the impressive presentations held in the main conference room. Curiosity piqued. She moved to the glass railing that overlooked the atrium and peered down into the dimly lit lobby. What she saw made her freeze in place, her hand gripping the cold steel railing. A man in a security uniform was patiently helping a small child with her homework, using his phone's flashlight to illuminate the pages when the emergency lighting proved insufficient. The dedication in his voice carried clearly in the empty building as he explained basic addition to his daughter, using gentle encouragement and infinite patience that reminded Victoria of her own father, who had died when she was Emma's age. "If you have 3 apples and I give you 2 more apples, how many apples do you have total?" Marcus asked, using actual apple slices from his lunch to demonstrate the math problem. 5, Emma announced proudly, carefully counting each piece of fruit. "That's right. You're getting so good at addition, sweetheart. Soon you'll be helping me with my math homework." Victoria's heart clenched. Something about this scene reminded her of her own childhood struggles, when her single mother worked 3 jobs to keep them afloat after her father's death in a construction accident. But there was something else. Something in the way the security guard explained mathematical concepts that suggested he understood far more than basic arithmetic. She found herself unable to look away as the man helped his daughter organize her school papers, with the same methodical precision she'd seen in her best project managers. There was an intelligence in his movements, a systematic approach to problem-solving that spoke of education and training, far beyond what his current position might suggest. As Victoria watched this tender scene unfold, she had no idea that what she was witnessing would challenge everything she thought she knew about the people who worked in her building, about success and failure, and about the thin line between prosperity and poverty that could be crossed by anyone, at any time, for any reason. The discovery she was about to make would change not just her own life, but the lives of this devoted father and his remarkable daughter, in ways that none of them could possibly imagine on this cold December night in Chicago. Victoria couldn't tear herself away from the scene unfolding 32 floors below her executive office. She found herself settling into one of the leather chairs from the nearby conference room, unconsciously making herself comfortable as she continued to observe this unexpected late-night study session. She watched as Marcus helped Emma sound out words from the tattered Dr. Seuss book, his patience infinite despite the obvious exhaustion evident in his shoulders and the dark circles under his eyes. The little girl's giggle echoed through the empty lobby when she successfully read a difficult sentence about the cat's mischievous adventures. The pure joy in that sound made Victoria smile for the first time in weeks. Her own life had become a series of board meetings, profit reports, and strategic decisions that affected thousands of employees, but rarely brought her personal happiness. "Daddy, why do we have to study here?" Emma asked innocently, her 6-year-old mind beginning to notice that her nightly routine was different from her classmates. Jenny's mommy has a big desk at home with lots of bright lights and fancy pencils, and Tommy has his own computer in his room. Marcus's jaw tightened slightly, and Victoria could see him struggling to find the right words. She leaned forward unconsciously, invested now in hearing how this father would handle such a loaded question from his innocent daughter. "Because we're saving money for something very special, sweetheart," Marcus said carefully, his voice steady despite what Victoria could see was internal pain. "Remember our dream about the house with the yellow front door that we saw in that magazine at the doctor's office?" Emma's eyes lit up like Christmas morning, and she clapped her small hands together with excitement. "With the big garden where I can plant sunflowers and tomatoes? And the swing set in the backyard?" "That's exactly right, baby girl. And there's going to be a special room just for you to do your homework, with a real desk and a lamp that's bright enough to read all your favorite books, Marcus promised, his voice thick with emotion. Every night we study here gets us one step closer to that dream house. Victoria felt tears welling in her eyes as she realized the magnitude of sacrifice this man was making. He was working security at night, probably had another job during the day, and was still managing to create a positive, hopeful environment for his daughter despite circumstances that would break most people. As Marcus pulled out a peanut butter sandwich wrapped in aluminum foil, Victoria noticed how he carefully cut it into neat triangles with a plastic knife, giving Emma the larger pieces while taking only small bites for himself. His entire lunch looked like it was meant for one person, stretched to feed two. The sandwich was accompanied by a bruised apple, also carefully divided, and a small thermos of what appeared to be powdered milk mixed with water. Mrs. Patterson from apartment 4B gave us extra chocolate chip cookies today, Emma announced excitedly, pulling out 2 homemade cookies wrapped in a paper napkin. She said they were getting stale, but they taste perfect to me. That's because you helped her carry her groceries up 3 flights of stairs yesterday, Marcus replied, his voice warm with pride as he watched his daughter's face light up. Mrs. Patterson is 83 years old, Em. Those bags were heavy for her. Kindness always comes back to us when we least expect it, but we should never do kind things just because we expect something in return. Victoria made a mental note to research who Mrs. Patterson was, and whether there might be ways to help this elderly woman who was clearly looking out for Marcus and Emma. But first, she needed to know more about this Marcus Thompson. Something in his manner of speaking, his way of explaining concepts to his daughter, and his methodical approach to organizing their study time, told her this security guard was hiding depths that would surprise everyone who met him. "Daddy, will you help me practice my spelling words?" Emma asked, pulling out a list of vocabulary words that Victoria could see were quite advanced for a first grader. "Of course, sweetheart. Let's start with the first one. Can you spell because?" As Emma carefully spelled out each letter, Victoria noticed that Marcus wasn't just helping his daughter memorize the words. He was explaining their etymology, their prefixes and suffixes, and how they connected to other words they'd learned. This wasn't the vocabulary coaching of someone with limited education. This was the systematic, comprehensive approach of someone with deep knowledge of language and learning theory. The more Victoria observed, the more questions arose in her mind. Who was Marcus Thompson really? How had he ended up working security in her building? And why did she have the growing suspicion that his current job was a dramatic underutilization of his actual capabilities? What she discovered in HR records the next morning would shake her understanding of sacrifice, determination, and the power of a father's love to overcome seemingly impossible obstacles. But more than that, it would force her to confront uncomfortable truths about opportunity, privilege, and the arbitrary nature of success and failure in America. The investigation Victoria was about to undertake would reveal a story so compelling, so heartbreaking, and ultimately so inspiring that it would change her entire perspective on what it meant to be truly wealthy. The next morning, Victoria arrived at her office earlier than usual, her mind still processing the scene she'd witnessed the night before. Her first call was to Janet Morrison, her head of human resources, requesting the complete personnel file for Marcus Thompson. What she found when Janet arrived with the thick folder made her hands tremble slightly as she turned each carefully organized page. This wasn't just any security guard working double shifts to make ends meet. This was a man whose story would challenge everything Victoria thought she knew about talent, opportunity, and the circumstances that could derail even the most promising futures. Marcus Anthony Thompson had graduated summa cum laude from Northwestern University with a bachelor's degree in mechanical engineering. His transcripts showed a 3.94 GPA and glowing recommendations from professors who described him as exceptional, brilliant, and destined for groundbreaking work in renewable energy systems. Dr. Patricia Williams, his senior thesis advisor, had written a particularly compelling recommendation letter stating that Marcus's innovative solar panel efficiency research showed the kind of revolutionary thinking that occurs perhaps once in a generation. But the accolades didn't stop there. Marcus had been accepted to graduate school at MIT with a full scholarship to pursue his master's degree in sustainable energy engineering. His undergraduate thesis on improving solar panel efficiency in urban environments had been published in the Journal of Renewable Energy Systems and had been cited by researchers across the globe. At 26, Marcus Thompson had been positioned to become one of the leading voices in the fight against climate change. Victoria continued reading, her heart sinking as the story unfolded. Emma had been born 3 months premature during Marcus's first semester of graduate school. The medical bills mounted quickly. Emma spent 4 months in the neonatal intensive care unit, requiring specialized care that even good insurance couldn't fully cover. Marcus had taken a leave of absence from MIT to be with his daughter, and to work full-time to pay the mounting medical expenses that reached nearly $300,000. When Emma finally came home, she required ongoing therapy and medical monitoring. Marcus had planned to return to graduate school the following year, but Emma's mother, Sarah, was struggling with postpartum depression and the stress of their financial situation. Marcus made the difficult decision to defer his graduate program another year to provide stability for his family and to continue working to pay down their debt. That deferral became permanent when Sarah left 2 years later. Victoria found copies of the divorce papers, and her heart ached as she read Sarah's statement to the court, claiming she couldn't handle the stress of Marcus's financial struggles and Emma's ongoing medical needs. She had abandoned her husband and daughter, leaving Marcus with full custody, no support, and debts that seemed insurmountable. Victoria discovered that Marcus had applied to dozens of engineering firms over the past 3 years. She found copies of rejection letters that all cited the same concern: his significant employment gap and lack of recent engineering experience. Companies wanted engineers who could hit the ground running, not someone who would need time to update their knowledge after years away from the field. The most heartbreaking discovery was a folder labeled Professional Development. Marcus had been studying for his professional engineering license during Emma's nap times, and after she went to sleep, using library books because he couldn't afford the review courses that cost $2,000. He had notebooks filled with hand-copied practice problems and carefully drawn diagrams, showing that he was teaching himself advanced engineering concepts that most practicing engineers paid thousands of dollars to learn. Her assistant knocked softly on the office door. "Mrs. Sterling? The quarterly budget meeting with the board members is scheduled to start in 10 minutes. They're all here." "Cancel it," Victoria replied without looking up from Marcus's file. "Cancel everything on my schedule today. Tell them I have an urgent personal matter that requires my immediate attention." "But Mrs. Sterling, the Japanese investors are calling this afternoon about—" "Janet can handle the investors. I trust her judgment completely. I need today to investigate something that could be far more important to this company's future than any single deal." That evening, Victoria returned to the building at 10:30 p.m., her heart racing with anticipation and nervousness. She had spent the day researching not just Marcus's background, but also learning about the challenges facing single parents in America, the barriers to re-entering professional careers after employment gaps, and the systemic issues that kept talented people trapped in survival mode. She took the stairs to avoid the elevator's distinctive ding and positioned herself in the same observation spot as the night before. Once again, Marcus and Emma were there in their improvised classroom, huddled around their cardboard box desks under the dim emergency lighting. Tonight, Emma was struggling with a science worksheet about the solar system, specifically about planetary orbits and gravitational forces. As Victoria watched, Marcus began explaining these complex concepts using salt shakers, a coffee cup, and his keychain as visual aids. His explanation was so clear, so methodical, and so scientifically accurate that Victoria found herself taking mental notes. "Jupiter is the biggest planet in our solar system," Emma announced proudly after successfully identifying it on her worksheet. "That's absolutely right, and do you know why Jupiter has so many moons orbiting around it?" Marcus asked, genuinely excited to share advanced scientific knowledge with his 6-year-old daughter. Victoria watched in amazement as this brilliant man, who should have been designing next-generation solar systems or developing revolutionary clean energy solutions, taught his daughter about astronomy using condiment packets and office supplies. The injustice of it all made her chest tight with emotion and righteous anger at a system that could waste such extraordinary talent. But Emma's next innocent question would reveal something that would change Victoria's entire perspective on wealth, success, and what truly mattered in life. It would also plant the seed of an idea that would transform not just Marcus and Emma's future, but potentially the future of sustainable energy research itself. "Daddy, are we poor?" Emma asked quietly, her small voice carrying clearly through the empty lobby with the innocent directness that only children possess. Marcus froze completely, his hand halfway to adjusting the makeshift lighting system he'd created with his phone and a small mirror he'd found in the lost and found box. Victoria held her breath 32 floors above, her heart pounding as she waited to hear how this devoted father would handle such an innocent yet devastating question from his 6-year-old daughter. The silence stretched for what felt like an eternity. Victoria could see Marcus's internal struggle playing out in his body language, the way his shoulders tensed, how he carefully set down Emma's science worksheet, and the deliberate breath he took before responding. This was clearly a conversation he'd been dreading but knew was inevitable. "What makes you ask that, sweetheart?" Marcus asked gently, pulling Emma onto his lap with infinite tenderness. His voice was steady, but Victoria could see the pain in his eyes even from her distant vantage point. "Well," Emma began, her 6-year-old mind processing complex social dynamics with startling clarity. "Tommy Henderson at school said only poor kids eat peanut butter sandwiches every single day, and his mom volunteers in the lunchroom, and she told Mrs. Rodriguez that she feels sorry for the kids whose parents can't afford the hot lunch program." Victoria felt her heart breaking as she realized Emma had been subjected to the casual cruelty that adults often inflicted without thinking about the children who might be listening. "And yesterday, when we went to the grocery store, I heard you tell the cashier lady that you couldn't buy me the sparkly notebooks I wanted because we had to stick to essentials this month. Sarah's daddy buys her new notebooks whenever she wants them, and she has a whole collection of gel pens in every color." Marcus was quiet for a long moment, and Victoria could see him carefully choosing his words with the precision of an engineer solving a complex equation. She found herself leaning forward unconsciously, desperate to hear how he would navigate this impossible conversation. "Emma, do you know what rich really means?" Marcus asked finally, his voice warm despite the obvious difficulty of the topic. The little girl shook her head, her curls bouncing as she looked up at her father with complete trust and expectation. "Most people think rich means having lots of money to buy things, but I think rich means having everything you need to be happy and to become the best person you can be. We have each other, don't we?" "Yes, Daddy, we have the best hugs in the whole world." "That's right, and we have your books, and this warm, safe place to study every night, and Mrs. Patterson's cookies sometimes when we help her with her groceries. And peanut butter sandwiches," Emma added enthusiastically, making Marcus smile genuinely for the first time Victoria had seen that evening. "I actually like peanut butter better than hot lunch anyway. Jenny got the hot lunch once and she said the meatloaf was yucky." "That's my girl," Marcus laughed, the sound echoing through the empty lobby. "And do you know what the richest thing of all is?" "What, Daddy?" "How much I love you, and how proud I am of how smart and kind and brave you are. No amount of money in the world could buy the pride I feel when your teacher tells me you helped a new student feel welcome, or when you share your lunch with someone who forgot theirs, or when you work so hard on your homework even when it's difficult." Emma seemed satisfied with this answer, snuggling closer to her father with a contentment that came from feeling completely loved and secure. But Victoria noticed that Marcus's hands were shaking slightly as he reopened Emma's homework folder. She could see the weight of worry in his shoulders, the fear that he wasn't providing enough for his daughter, and the crushing responsibility he felt as Emma's sole protector in a world that could be harsh and unforgiving. Victoria thought about her own penthouse apartment overlooking Lake Michigan, her collection of luxury cars sitting in her private garage, her vacation homes in Aspen and the Hamptons that she visited maybe twice a year. She had everything money could buy: art collections, designer wardrobes, and investments that generated more money in a month than most people made in a year. But she'd never experienced the pure love and contentment she was witnessing between this father and daughter. She'd never had anyone look at her the way Emma looked at Marcus, with complete adoration, trust, and joy. Her own relationships had been complicated by questions of money, power, and mutual benefit. She couldn't remember the last time someone had loved her simply for who she was, without any consideration of what she could provide, or what advantage she might offer. As Emma drifted off to sleep against Marcus's chest around 11:30, he continued studying his own materials. Engineering journals he'd photocopied at the public library, professional development courses he'd downloaded for free from university websites, and practice problems for his PE exam that he worked through with the dedication of someone who still believed in the power of education to change his circumstances. Victoria watched him solve complex thermodynamics problems in the margins of his notebooks, his handwriting neat and precise despite working in dim lighting. She saw him reference formulas from memory and work through calculations that would challenge most practicing engineers. This man's mind was clearly as sharp as ever, perhaps even sharper for having been tested by real-world challenges that no textbook could have prepared him for. What Victoria did next would test every assumption Marcus had about rich people, about kindness, about whether the American dream was still possible for people like him, and about whether miracles really could happen to ordinary families just trying to survive with dignity and hope in an increasingly expensive world. Victoria spent the next 3 days conducting the most thorough investigation of her career, not into a potential business acquisition or market opportunity, but into the life and character of her night security guard and his remarkable daughter. She visited Emma's school, Riverside Elementary, posing as a potential donor interested in understanding the needs of the student body. What she learned from Emma's teacher, Mrs. Rodriguez, broke her heart and solidified her growing respect for Marcus Thompson as both a father and a human being of extraordinary character. Emma is one of our brightest students, Mrs. Rodriguez explained as they sat in the colorful first-grade classroom decorated with student artwork and educational posters. Her reading comprehension is at a 4th-grade level, and her mathematical reasoning skills are simply exceptional for her age. But what makes her truly special is her kindness and empathy toward other children. Victoria learned that Emma consistently scored in the 98th percentile on standardized tests, despite having none of the educational advantages that many of her classmates enjoyed: no private tutoring, no educational software, no supplementary learning materials beyond what the school provided. She shares her lunch with kids who forget theirs, and she never complains about her worn clothes or supplies. Mrs. Rodriguez continued, "Last month, when we had a new student from El Salvador who spoke very little English, Emma spent every recess teaching her basic English words and helping her feel included. Emma has this remarkable ability to see when someone needs help and to provide it without making them feel embarrassed or different." Victoria discovered that Marcus volunteered at every school event, despite working 6 days a week. He helped with fundraisers, chaperoned field trips on his days off, and even used his engineering skills to fix broken playground equipment, all for free and without being asked. The school's maintenance budget had been cut by 30% the previous year, and Marcus had quietly stepped in to handle repairs that would have otherwise gone undone. He rebuilt our entire computer lab network last summer, Mrs. Rodriguez shared with obvious admiration. The district couldn't afford to hire an IT specialist, and our computers were constantly crashing. Marcus spent his vacation days rewiring the whole system and installing donated hardware that he somehow acquired and refurbished. He saved us at least $15,000 in professional fees. He never asked for help, though we've offered, Mrs. Rodriguez continued, her voice filled with respect and a touch of frustration. There's a pride in him, but not the bad kind, not arrogance or stubbornness. He just wants to handle things himself and to teach Emma that hard work and integrity will eventually be rewarded. Sometimes I worry that he's too optimistic about how fair the world really is. Victoria also discovered that Marcus had been quietly helping other struggling families in their apartment building. Mrs. Patterson, the elderly woman Emma had mentioned, told Victoria how Marcus fixed her heater last winter when she couldn't afford a repair technician, and how he drove her to medical appointments when the city bus routes were too difficult for her to navigate with her walker. That young man is an angel, Mrs. Patterson said when Victoria visited her under the pretense of conducting a neighborhood safety survey. He never asks for anything in return, and he always makes sure Emma understands that helping others isn't something special. It's just what good people do for each other. That evening, Victoria made a decision that would change 3 lives forever. She spent an hour preparing for the conversation, rehearsing different approaches and trying to anticipate how Marcus might react to what she was about to propose. This wasn't like negotiating a business deal where she could rely on market analysis and financial projections. This was about human dignity, trust, and the delicate process of offering help to someone who had clearly been hurt by life, but hadn't allowed that hurt to make him bitter or cynical. She arrived at the corporate building at her usual time, but instead of hiding in her observation post, she walked directly to the security desk, with her heart pounding harder than it had during any board meeting or investor presentation. Marcus looked up in surprise as the perfectly dressed CEO of Sterling Enterprises approached him, her designer heels clicking against the marble floor. His professional instincts kicked in immediately, and Victoria could see him mentally reviewing the building's security protocols to determine if there might be an emergency or threat he should be aware of. "Good evening, Mrs. Sterling," he said, standing respectfully. "Is everything all right? Do you need access to your office, or is there a security concern I should be aware of?" "I need to talk to you," Victoria interrupted gently, her voice softer than her usual boardroom tone. "Both of you." Emma peeked out from behind her father, curious about this elegant woman who seemed so different from anyone they usually encountered in their daily lives. Victoria noticed that Emma's homework was spread across clean cardboard boxes that had been carefully reinforced and organized, and that Marcus had somehow acquired a small desk lamp, probably from the building's surplus supplies, to provide better lighting for their study sessions. "Sir, if I've done something wrong," Marcus began, his voice tight with the worry that came from years of having to be constantly vigilant about keeping his job. "You haven't done anything wrong, Marcus," Victoria said firmly. "In fact, you've done everything right, but I have a question for you and I want you to be completely honest with me." Marcus straightened unconsciously, his protective instincts flaring as he placed himself slightly in front of Emma. Victoria could see that he was preparing himself for bad news, for another disappointment, for another door closing just when he'd begun to hope it might open. If someone offered you a chance to change your life, to use that brilliant engineering mind of yours the way it was meant to be used, to give Emma everything she deserves and more, what would you say? The question hung in the air like a challenge, like a test, like the first words of a fairy tale that might actually come true. Victoria watched Marcus's face carefully, seeing confusion, hope, disbelief, and wariness all competing for dominance in his expression. Marcus's answer would determine not just his own future and Emma's, but whether Victoria Sterling was about to become the guardian angel this family desperately needed, or just another wealthy person making empty promises to ease her own conscience. The next few minutes would test everything both of them believed about trust, opportunity, and the possibility that sometimes, in the darkest moments, life could surprise you with unexpected grace. Marcus stared at Victoria for a long moment that seemed to stretch into eternity, his engineering mind racing through possibilities, probabilities, and potential outcomes. This was the woman who owned half of downtown Chicago, whose business decisions affected thousands of lives, whose success story was taught in MBA programs across the country. Why was she here in the lobby of her own building at nearly midnight, talking to him like his answer actually mattered? "Mrs. Sterling," he said carefully, his voice steady despite the chaos of emotions churning in his chest. "I'm not sure I understand what you're asking. Are you offering me a different position within the security department? Because I want you to know that I'm grateful for this job, and I would never do anything to jeopardize—" "I'm not talking about security work, Marcus," Victoria interrupted gently. She knelt down to Emma's level, bringing herself to the little girl's height with the natural grace of someone accustomed to making others feel comfortable. "Hi, sweetheart, I'm Victoria. What's your favorite subject in school?" "Science," Emma replied excitedly, her natural enthusiasm overcoming any shyness she might have felt. "Daddy teaches me about planets and how things work and why the sky changes colors at sunset. He knows everything about everything. He's the smartest person in the whole world." "I bet he is." Victoria smiled genuinely, charmed by Emma's complete confidence in her father. Then she looked back at Marcus, her expression becoming more serious and businesslike. "I've been watching you both for several nights. I know about your Northwestern engineering degree, your graduate school acceptance to MIT, your situation with Emma's medical bills, and how incredibly hard you've been working to provide for your daughter while continuing your professional development." Marcus's face flushed with embarrassment and something that looked like panic. His first instinct was to protect his privacy and his dignity, both of which felt suddenly exposed and vulnerable. "Ma'am, if you're concerned about Emma being here during my shifts, I can explain the situation. My babysitter quit unexpectedly, and I haven't been able to find affordable childcare that would work with my schedule. Emma doesn't interfere with my duties, and she's always asleep by midnight." "I'm not concerned, Marcus. I'm impressed." Victoria stood, her business persona taking over as she recognized that this conversation required the same strategic thinking she used in high-stakes negotiations. "But I have a proposition for you. My company is about to begin development on the largest sustainable energy project in the Midwest, a combination solar and wind facility that could power half of Illinois while reducing carbon emissions by 40%. We need a lead project engineer, someone brilliant, dedicated, innovative, and capable of solving complex problems with limited resources." Marcus felt his heart begin to race as he processed what she was saying. This couldn't be real. Things like this didn't happen to people like him. Not anymore. Not after 3 years of rejection letters and closed doors and well-meaning advice to be realistic about his options. "Mrs. Sterling, I appreciate whatever this is, but I haven't worked as an engineer in over 4 years. My knowledge of current industry standards is outdated, my software certifications have expired, and I don't have recent references from engineering supervisors. Any HR department would reject my application before it reached an actual hiring manager. And you've been studying for your professional engineering license while working 60-hour weeks and raising a daughter alone, Victoria countered immediately. You've been teaching yourself advanced, sustainable energy concepts that most practicing engineers learn in expensive continuing education courses. You've been solving complex problems with creativity and resourcefulness that no textbook can teach. That tells me more about your character, your capability, and your potential value to my company than any traditional resume ever could. Emma tugged on Marcus's sleeve, her 6-year-old mind struggling to follow the adult conversation, but sensing that something important was happening. "Daddy, what's she talking about? Are you going to get a new job?" Victoria answered before Marcus could find his voice. "I'm talking about giving your daddy a job where he can use his incredible brain to help make the world better by creating clean energy for lots and lots of people. And maybe, just maybe, helping you both get that house with the yellow door and the garden where you can plant sunflowers." Marcus felt the world spinning around him as the full implications of what Victoria was suggesting began to sink in. This wasn't just a job offer. This was the chance to reclaim the future he'd sacrificed for Emma's medical care, to use his education and training for their intended purpose, to provide Emma with opportunities he'd only been able to dream about for the past 3 years. But years of disappointment and financial stress had taught him to be cautious about hope, to protect himself and Emma from the devastation that came when possibilities proved to be illusions. "There would be conditions," Victoria added, watching his face carefully. "Several of them, actually." "What conditions?" Marcus asked, barely able to breathe as he waited for the catch, the limitation, the requirement that would make this opportunity as impossible as all the others had proven to be. "First, you'll need to complete your PE certification within 6 months, which the company will pay for, including all study materials and examination fees. Second, you'll need to relocate to our Naperville facility, which means finding a new place to live. The company will cover all moving expenses and provide a housing allowance during the transition period." Marcus's mind reeled. These weren't obstacles. They were solutions to problems he'd been struggling with for months. "Third," Victoria continued, her eyes twinkling with something Marcus couldn't quite identify, "you'll have to let me take both of you shopping for some proper study supplies this weekend. Emma deserves better than cardboard boxes and makeshift lighting for her homework time." As Emma squealed with delight and threw her arms around Victoria's legs with the uninhibited joy that only children possess, Marcus felt tears he'd been holding back for 3 years finally begin to fall. But these weren't tears of exhaustion, frustration, or despair. They were tears of hope, gratitude, and the overwhelming realization that sometimes, when you least expect it and most need it, life can surprise you in the most beautiful and transformative way. "There's one more thing," Victoria said softly, placing a gentle hand on Marcus's shoulder as he struggled to process the magnitude of what was happening. "The starting salary is $95,000 annually, with full medical benefits, 4 weeks paid vacation, and a contribution to Emma's college fund that begins immediately." Marcus felt his knees weaken as the number registered in his mind. It was more money than he'd made in the past 2 years combined. It was security, stability, and the chance to give Emma everything he'd dreamed of providing for her. What would happen next would test every assumption about class, kindness, opportunity, and whether fairy tales could come true in modern-day America. But for the first time in years, Marcus Thompson allowed himself to believe that maybe, just maybe, the future could be different than the past. 3 weeks had passed since that life-changing conversation in the lobby of Sterling Enterprises, and Marcus could barely recognize his own life. The transformation had been so swift and comprehensive that he sometimes wondered if he was living in a dream, from which he might suddenly wake up back in the security office with Emma sleeping on cardboard boxes. Victoria had been true to every single promise she'd made that night. Within 48 hours of their conversation, Marcus had been officially hired as senior project engineer for the Midwest Sustainable Energy Initiative, with a starting date that allowed him 2 weeks to transition out of his security position and prepare for his new role. The HR department had processed his paperwork with unprecedented speed, and Marcus suspected that Victoria had personally ensured every obstacle was removed from his path. The shopping trip Victoria had insisted upon had been an experience that Emma would remember for the rest of her life. Victoria had arrived at their cramped one-bedroom apartment in Riverside that Saturday morning, driving a modest Honda Accord rather than the luxury vehicle Marcus had expected. "I don't want to overwhelm Emma," she'd explained with a smile. "This is about making her feel special, not making her feel different." They'd spent 4 hours at an educational supply store, where Emma had been given free rein to choose notebooks, pencils, markers, and educational games to her heart's content. Victoria had watched with obvious joy as Emma carefully selected each item, reading labels and asking thoughtful questions about how different supplies might help her learn more effectively. The 6-year-old's methodical approach to shopping, so much like her father's systematic problem-solving style, had clearly impressed Victoria. "She's going to be running a company someday," Victoria had whispered to Marcus as they watched Emma compare different types of calculators designed for elementary students. "Mark my words, that little girl has the mind of a born leader." But the shopping trip had been just the beginning. Victoria had also arranged for Marcus to meet with Dr. Jennifer Chen, Sterling Enterprises Director of Human Resources, who had worked with him to create a personalized study plan for his professional engineering certification. The company had enrolled him in an intensive review course that normally cost $3,000, provided him with the latest study materials and software, and arranged for him to take practice exams with other engineers in the company. "We're investing in your success," Dr. Chen had explained during their first meeting. "Mrs. Sterling believes you have the potential to become one of our most valuable team members, and we're going to provide you with every resource you need to prove her right." Now, as Marcus sat in his temporary office at Sterling's Naperville facility, reviewing technical specifications for solar panel installations, he felt a sense of professional fulfillment that he'd almost forgotten was possible. His desk, a real desk with proper lighting and an ergonomic chair, was covered with engineering drawings, environmental impact assessments, and cost-benefit analyses that reminded him why he'd fallen in love with this field in the first place. The Midwest Sustainable Energy Initiative was even more ambitious than Victoria had initially described. The project would create a 500-megawatt solar and wind facility capable of providing clean energy to over 200,000 homes, while creating 300 permanent jobs in rural Illinois communities that desperately needed economic development. Marcus's role was to oversee the technical integration of multiple renewable energy systems, ensuring maximum efficiency and minimal environmental impact. His new colleagues had welcomed him with genuine enthusiasm once they learned about his background and saw examples of his work. Dr. Sarah Kim, the project's environmental impact specialist, had been particularly impressed with Marcus's innovative ideas for minimizing habitat disruption during construction. "Your approach to phased installation is brilliant," she'd told him during their first project meeting. "Most engineers focus solely on technical efficiency, but you're thinking about ecological integration from the very beginning. That's exactly the kind of holistic thinking this project needs." Emma had adapted to their new circumstances with the resilience that had always amazed Marcus. Their new apartment in Naperville was a spacious 2-bedroom unit in a family-friendly complex with a playground, swimming pool, and an excellent school district. Emma's new room had everything Marcus had ever dreamed of providing for her: a proper desk with excellent lighting, bookshelves filled with age-appropriate educational materials, and even a small reading nook by the window where she could curl up with her favorite stories. "Daddy, I can't believe this is really our house," Emma had said on their first night in the new apartment, spinning around in her room with pure joy. "And tomorrow I get to go to a new school with a real science lab." Riverside Elementary had been sad to see Emma go, but Mrs. Rodriguez had been thrilled about the opportunities awaiting her star student. "Emma's new school has a gifted and talented program that will challenge her appropriately," she'd told Marcus during their farewell meeting. "She's going to thrive there, just like she thrived here despite having fewer resources to work with." But the most significant change in Marcus's life wasn't the salary increase or the professional recognition. It was the growing friendship he was developing with Victoria Sterling herself. What had begun as the employer-employee relationship was evolving into something deeper and more meaningful, a mutual respect and genuine caring that surprised both of them. Victoria had begun stopping by Marcus's office every few days, ostensibly to check on the project's progress, but really to hear about Emma's adjustment to her new school and Marcus's experience returning to engineering work. These conversations often stretched beyond business matters, as they discovered shared interests in environmental sustainability, educational reform, and the challenges facing single parents in America. "You know," Victoria had said during one of these visits, "watching Emma blossom in her new environment has reminded me why I started this company in the first place. It wasn't about building wealth. It was about creating opportunities for people to use their talents to make the world better." Marcus had learned that Victoria's motivation for helping his family went far deeper than mere charity or corporate social responsibility. She had grown up poor herself, the daughter of a single mother who had worked multiple jobs to provide basic necessities. Victoria's success hadn't made her forget those struggles. It had intensified her awareness of how random circumstances could determine whether talented people got the chances they deserved. "My mother died when I was 15, Victoria had shared one evening as they reviewed project timelines. "She never got to see me graduate from high school, let alone build this company. But she taught me that success means nothing if you don't use it to lift other people up. You and Emma have reminded me of that lesson." As Marcus prepared to leave the office that evening, he reflected on how dramatically his life had changed and how much more change was still to come. Tomorrow, Emma would be starting her new school, and he would be presenting his preliminary designs for the solar installation to Sterling's board of directors. 6 months ago, he couldn't have imagined either of those things would ever be possible. But as he packed up his engineering materials and prepared to head home to help Emma with her homework at a real desk with proper lighting, Marcus realized that the most important transformation wasn't in his professional circumstances or living situation. It was in his renewed sense of hope and possibility, the belief that hard work, integrity, and a little bit of unexpected kindness could still change lives in ways that seemed miraculous, but were really just what happened when people chose to see and respond to each other's humanity. What Marcus didn't know was that Victoria had been planning something even more significant than a job offer or a better living situation, something that would test the depth of their growing friendship and reveal just how far Victoria was willing to go to ensure that Emma had every advantage she deserved in life. Emma's first day at Meadowbrook Elementary School exceeded even Marcus's most optimistic expectations. The gifted and talented program that Mrs. Rodriguez had mentioned proved to be everything they had hoped for, and more. Emma's new teacher, Ms. Patricia Foster, was a veteran educator with a master's degree in gifted education who immediately recognized Emma's exceptional abilities and unique learning style. "Your daughter is remarkable," Ms. Foster told Marcus during their first parent conference, just 2 weeks after Emma had started at the new school. "Her reading comprehension is at a 7th grade level, but what's even more impressive is her emotional intelligence and her ability to help other students learn. She's a natural teacher." Marcus learned that Emma had quickly become the unofficial classroom helper, patiently working with struggling students during reading time and explaining math concepts to classmates who were having difficulty. Her teachers were amazed by her ability to break down complex ideas into simple, understandable terms, a skill she'd clearly learned from watching her father explain engineering concepts during their late-night study sessions. "She reminds me of you," Victoria observed one evening when she stopped by Marcus's office to hear about Emma's latest academic achievements. That same methodical approach to problem-solving, the same patience with people who learn differently, the same genuine joy in discovering how things work. Victoria had become a regular presence in their lives, but not in the way Marcus had initially expected. Rather than maintaining the formal distance typical of CEO-employee relationships, Victoria had gradually become something closer to a family friend. She remembered Emma's favorite books, asked about her science projects, and even attended Emma's first school play, where Emma had played a tree in the environmental conservation pageant. "I've never had anyone outside of family show this much interest in Emma's life," Marcus had confided to his neighbor Mrs. Patterson, who had moved to a senior living facility near their new apartment. "Sometimes I wonder if Victoria sees something in Emma that reminds her of herself as a child." Mrs. Patterson, now 84 but still sharp as ever, had smiled knowingly. "That woman isn't just interested in Emma, son, she's interested in both of you. I've lived long enough to recognize when someone has found a family they didn't know they were looking for." Meanwhile, Marcus's work on the Midwest Sustainable Energy Initiative was earning recognition throughout Sterling Enterprises and beyond. His innovative approach to integrating solar panels with existing agricultural land, allowing farmers to continue growing crops while generating renewable energy, had caught the attention of the Department of Energy. Dr. Kim had submitted Marcus's preliminary designs to a national competition for sustainable energy innovation, and the project had been selected as one of 10 finalists nationwide. This could put Sterling Enterprises at the forefront of agricultural solar integration research, Victoria explained to Marcus during a celebration dinner she'd organized at a family-friendly restaurant that Emma would enjoy. "Your work isn't just solving our project challenges, it's pioneering solutions that could be replicated across the entire Midwest." Emma, now comfortable enough with Victoria to treat her like a beloved aunt, had listened to these adult conversations with fascination. "Daddy's making the world better with science. why she announced proudly to their waitress. And someday I'm going to be a scientist too, and we'll work together to make sure all the polar bears have enough ice. Victoria had laughed at Emma's environmental enthusiasm, but Marcus noticed that she made a note in her phone about educational programs focused on climate science for elementary students. Victoria never forgot details about things that mattered to Emma, and her attention to his daughter's interests had become one of the things Marcus valued most about their evolving relationship. The professional recognition Marcus was receiving had also opened doors he'd never expected to walk through. The University of Illinois had invited him to guest lecture in their renewable energy engineering program, sharing his experiences with agricultural solar integration. Northwestern University, his alma mater, had asked him to serve on an advisory committee for their sustainable energy research lab. "It's remarkable how quickly the engineering community has embraced your work," Dr. Chen observed during one of their monthly check-ins. "You've been back in active practice for less than 3 months, but you're already being recognized as a thought leader in your field." But perhaps the most significant change in Marcus's life was the growing confidence and optimism that Emma displayed every day. The little girl who had once asked if they were poor now talked excitedly about her future plans to study environmental science, to travel to different countries to learn about renewable energy, and to help her father design solar systems that would make electricity affordable for everyone. "Daddy, Ms. Foster says I'm smart enough to skip 2nd grade and go right to 3rd grade next year," Emma announced one evening as they worked together on her homework, now spread across a proper desk in her own room with excellent lighting and all the supplies she could ever need. "But I told her I want to stay with my friends and be the best 2nd grader I can be first." Marcus felt his heart swell with pride as he realized that Emma was learning not just academic skills but life skills, the importance of loyalty to friends, the value of patience and steady progress, and the confidence to make her own decisions about her educational path. "That sounds like a very wise choice, Em," he told her. "There's no rush to grow up. You're perfect exactly as you are right now." What Marcus didn't realize was that Victoria had been having similar conversations with Emma during their private moments together, talks about dreams, goals, and possibilities that would shape Emma's understanding of what she could achieve in life. Victoria was becoming more than an employer or even a family friend. She was becoming a mentor, a role model, and something Emma had never had before, a successful woman who believed in her potential and was willing to invest in her future. The bond forming between Victoria and Emma would soon lead to a conversation that would challenge Marcus's independence, test his trust in Victoria's motives, and ultimately reveal the depth of commitment Victoria was prepared to make to ensure Emma had every opportunity to fulfill her remarkable potential.